Indiana. The apartment water turned sour maintenance, uncovered a corpse above the ceiling tank. On the morning of May 9th, 2025, maintenance worker Daniel Horner unlocked the door to Unit 312 at Ridgeway Towers in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The complaint from tenants below was urgent. The water from their tap had begun to run foul with a strange coppery smell, and the pressure had dropped sharply overnight. Daniel, a quiet man in his late 50s, expected a pipe leak or, at worst, a dead animal in the wall. But the moment he entered the unit, he paused. The air was heavy, humid, and rank like rusting metal left to stew in rot. The apartment had been vacant for 3 weeks. No new tenant, no movement. Following the stench, Daniel climbed the built-in maintenance ladder to the attic access above the bathroom ceiling tank. His hand trembled as he pushed the ceiling panel aside. The moment it gave way, something wet thudded onto the floor beside his boot. It was a human arm, pale, bloated, missing the hand. What Daniel pulled from the crawlspace that morning would haunt the entire county. Daniel Horner had worked maintenance at Ridgeway Towers for over 13 years. He had fixed broken water heaters, replaced cracked tiles, and patched holes left behind by careless tenants. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what he found that Friday morning. He had received the work order around 7:42 a.m. Tenant in Unit 211 reported foul-smelling water and low pressure. By 8:15, Daniel was standing outside Unit 312, the apartment directly above. The unit had been empty since mid-April. The last tenant had terminated their lease unexpectedly, and no new paperwork had been filed. He unlocked the door. The lights did not work. The place felt abandoned in the worst way, like someone had fled, not moved. Daniel followed the smell to the back of the unit, the bathroom. The water heater there connected to an overhead tank built into a utility crawlspace. It was common in older buildings like Ridgeway, where space was tight and corners had been cut during construction. He climbed the built-in maintenance ladder flashlight between his teeth and reached up to unhook the ceiling panel. His fingers slipped on the edge. It was damp. He wiped them on his jeans and tried again. This time, the panel gave way. And then it fell. A shape slick and misshapen dropped from the crawlspace and landed with a hollow slap against the bathroom tile. For a moment, Daniel thought it was insulation, but when he turned his light on it, he saw skin, pale, wrinkled, and unmistakably human. The forearm had no hand. The end had been sawed clean, the bone inside exposed and dark. Daniel stumbled back. His flashlight rolled away and clattered against the bathtub. He tried to breathe, but the smell was unbearable. He ran. Out the door, down the stairwell, and into the alley behind the building, where he fell to his knees and vomited. At 8:28 a.m., he called building management and told them to contact the police. His voice, normally even and low, cracked mid-sentence. "Tell them," he whispered. "Tell them there is a body up there." By 9:10 a.m., a patrol car from Fort Wayne PD had arrived. Officers secured the unit and began the initial sweep. Daniel sat on the back bumper of his work truck, wrapped in a thin blue blanket. His hands shook so violently that he could not hold the cup of water one officer had given him. Detective Linda Calder arrived minutes later. She was in plain clothes, blazer black boots, and gloves already on. She ducked beneath the police tape and stepped into Unit 312. What greeted her inside was worse than anything she had prepared herself for. The crawl space above the bathroom tank held not one but several trash bags taped torn and leaking. What had once been flesh had begun to melt. Limbs, pieces of clothing, and strands of long black hair clung to the rotting insulation. Blood had soaked into the drywall and begun dripping through the floor into the unit below. Back outside, Daniel gave his statement. "I never heard anything," he told them. "No fights, no yelling. But that smell, it had been there. I just thought it was mildew." He paused, then added almost to himself, "But the water, it started tasting like metal. You know, like pennies. And no matter how much you ran it, it stayed brown." The property manager confirmed that the last person to occupy Unit 312 was a 28-year-old woman named Miranda Faye Everly. She had moved in 6 months earlier. Quiet, paid in cash. No complaints. On April 14th, she sent an email saying she would be leaving early for family matters. The email included no forwarding address. What no one had noticed, or perhaps chose not to question, was that she never returned the keys, and now someone else's body had been found where she once lived. Police pulled Daniel aside later that afternoon. Did you ever see anyone else going into that apartment after she left? One officer asked him. Daniel shook his head, then stopped. There was someone once. A man. Maybe early May. I was leaving the boiler room and I saw him come up the service stairs. He had a hoodie pulled over his head and he was carrying, I do not know, a toolbox maybe. Could have been a bag. He squinted, trying to remember. He moved fast, like he knew where he was going. The officers nodded but said nothing. They were already starting to draw up a list of names. Inside the apartment, detectives had just discovered something else. Beneath the stained floorboards, jammed between two support beams, was a cell phone. Burned, the screen shattered. But the SIM card, by some miracle, was intact. And it belonged to Miranda Faye Everly. By 11:35 a.m., crime scene technicians were pulling body parts from the crawl space, placing them into hazmat bags, labeling them unknown female, and preparing them for transport to the Fort Wayne coroner's office. The entire floor had been evacuated, water lines shut off, power disconnected. What had started as a maintenance check for bad plumbing had become a full-blown homicide investigation. And Daniel Horner, a man who had once spent his days fixing light switches and unjamming garbage disposals, now found himself unable to sleep for nights to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again. That pale, lifeless arm sliding across the floor like it had been waiting for someone to find it. By 12:15 p.m. on May 9, 2025, Ridgeway Towers was no longer an apartment complex. It was a crime scene. Yellow police tape fluttered across every entrance. Squad cars lined the sidewalk. Residents had been ordered to leave their units with whatever they could carry in a single bag. Some clutched purses. Others had laundry baskets or duffel bags filled hastily with essentials. But all wore the same expression, wide-eyed confusion, slowly bleeding into dread. A mobile crime lab from the Fort Wayne Police Department arrived just after noon, trailed by a dark gray van marked Forensic Services Unit. Within minutes, investigators in white Tyvek suits began moving through the building's third floor. Their boots echoed against the hallway tiles as they placed numbered evidence markers and photographed every inch of Unit 312. It was not just the body parts that stunned them, it was where they had been hidden, stuffed into the narrow attic crawl space above a water tank, a space so tight and claustrophobic that only someone desperate or deranged would think to use it. A drone was deployed inside the crawl space. The footage it returned showed 4 separate trash bags. One had torn at the bottom, spilling its contents into the insulation. Another was zipped partially open. Inside, a human head decomposing, the skin blackened, had been wedged into a corner. Forensics technicians moved slowly and methodically, documenting each item. The remains were dismembered, limbs severed at the joints. The bones bore tool marks, small straight ridges consistent with a handsaw. The torso, though barely intact, revealed a jagged Y incision that had not been made by any medical professional. Multiple fingernails were missing. 2 of them were later found embedded in the insulation, broken and bloodied, suggesting the victim had fought back. Beneath the crawl space, the water tank was drained. Inside, technicians found clumps of dark hair, particles of fat, and trace amounts of blood. The victim had been leaking into the building's water supply for days, possibly weeks. Residents from neighboring units were pulled aside for questioning. When did you first notice the smell? Did you hear anything unusual during the nights? Do you know anyone who may have accessed Unit 312? One elderly woman from Unit 313 had tears in her eyes as she whispered, "I thought it was just something dead in the vents. My grandson came over last weekend and said the water tasted off." By late afternoon, the coroner's van arrived to transport the remains. Black body bags were carried down the back stairwell one at a time, under the quiet hum of drone surveillance overhead. On the third trip, a resident vomited into a bush by the sidewalk. Detective Linda Calder oversaw every step. She stood inside Unit 312, arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching as the last bag was zipped up. Something gnawed at her, something personal. She had been the one to approve the last missing person report filed on April 24th, Miranda Faye Everly. No known family. Former foster youth. Last seen by her downstairs neighbor 3 weeks ago. It had been just another name in a folder, until now. As the forensics team worked through the evening, more evidence surfaced. Bleach stains across the bathtub and linoleum floor. Smudged fingerprints on the doorframe of the crawlspace. A partially burned flannel shirt soaked in bodily fluid shoved behind the water heater, and wedged into the back of the kitchen cabinet drawer. A torn photograph. The photo showed Miranda with a man. He stood behind her, arms draped over her shoulders. His face was partially burned away from the photo, but the name scribbled in black ink on the bottom corner was clear: me plus Kyle, finally free. Forensics also confirmed that the ceiling panel had been re-glued shut with heavy-duty construction adhesive. Whoever had placed the body there had come prepared. One tech muttered this was not panic, this was planned. Outside the building's lobby became a temporary command center. Maps of the unit were pinned to portable whiteboards. A forensic sketch artist worked from the recovered photograph. A scent-trained K9 unit circled the block, pausing near the dumpster behind a closed Thai restaurant 2 buildings over. Inside that bin, they found a backpack. It contained a large red-stained towel, a prepaid burner phone powered off, a set of bolt cutters, a woman's torn purse with the initials Emmy. Back in the lab, a tech finally cracked the burned phone found beneath the floorboards. Despite the melted casing, the SIM card still held metadata. A series of texts from April 12th through April 14th surfaced. April 12th, 10:04 p.m. He came again. I told him I am done. He said, then we're both done. April 13th of 1:21 a.m. I am hiding the keys. I do not want to let him in. I think he made a copy. April 14th, 7:16 p.m. If anything happens to me, start with Kyle. He never really left. Those were the last messages ever sent from Miranda's phone. And now police had a name, a face, and a trail. By the time midnight came, Unit 312 had been sealed off completely. The hallway leading to it was blocked with an aluminum barricade. A single red tag hung from the doorknob. Evidence, do not enter. Fort Wayne PD was no longer asking if it was homicide. They were asking how it had taken so long to discover it, and who had been walking among them pretending nothing had happened while a body rotted in the ceiling above their heads. Day 1, May 9th, 2025. The scene is processed. By 1:00 a.m. on May 10th, the remains pulled from Unit 312 had been transported to the Allen County Coroner's Office. Inside the exam room, the medical examiner began the slow task of reassembling what had been found: 5 trash bags ahead, a partial torso limb sawed at multiple points. Several fingers were missing. The head's lower jaw had detached during decomposition. But even in that grotesque state, the long dark hair and healed scar above the right eyebrow left little doubt. A match to the missing person file confirmed it at 3:47 a.m. The victim was Miranda Faye Everly, age 28. The official cause of death was still pending, but the ME suspected suffocation or blunt force trauma to the head. There were fractures on the left temporal bone just above the ear, no ligature marks around the neck, no signs of drug injection. It was not an overdose, it was not a suicide, it was murder. And the disposal was surgical, intentional, personal. So, Day 2, May 10, 2025, the victim's life rebuilt. Detective Linda Calder arrived at the precinct just before sunrise. Coffee in one hand, Miranda's case folder in the other. Miranda had grown up in the foster care system. Her last known guardian had passed away 3 years earlier. She worked at a local dog grooming business on West Rudisill Boulevard, renting Unit 312 with the help of a housing assistance grant. No criminal record, no children. She was quiet, punctual, and described by coworkers as someone who kept to herself but had a soft heart. The man in the photograph, recovered from her unit, Kyle Dennett, 33, was not a stranger to police. He had 2 prior arrests, one for battery in 2020, another for illegal possession of a firearm in 2022. No convictions. Both cases had been dismissed after key witnesses withdrew their testimony. But most disturbing was the emergency call Miranda had made 6 months earlier on November 6, 2024. In the 911 transcript, her voice trembled. He is outside. He is pounding on the door. He said if I do not open it, he will break it down. When officers responded that night, Kyle had already left. No weapons were found. Miranda declined to press charges. She told them it had been a misunderstanding. But neighbors reported hearing shouting for over an hour, and that was not the only time. 2 months later, another neighbor saw Kyle inside Miranda's apartment. She said he looked like he lived there, but his name had never appeared on the lease. Day 3, May 11, 2025, the first trail appears. The backpack recovered from the restaurant dumpster held Kyle's DNA on the towel and the burner phone. Fingerprints matched his 2020 arrest. Even more damning was what police recovered from the burner's activity logs. The phone had connected to public Wi-Fi at a gas station, 2 blocks from Ridgeway Towers at 3:21 a.m. on April 15th. Exactly 1 day after Miranda's final text. Surveillance footage from that same station showed a man in a hoodie and cargo pants paying cash for a gas can. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the phone log. Facial recognition software gave a 94% match Kyle Dennett. Detectives tracked down a friend of Kyle's, a man named Ethan Bauer, who once worked with him at a salvage yard outside Fort Wayne. Ethan was reluctant to talk, but after some pressure, he admitted Kyle had shown up at his place late on April 16th, asking to crash on the couch for just a night or two. He brought no bags, just a phone charger and a change of clothes. When asked if Kyle said anything strange, Ethan paused. He was quiet. Real quiet. Then out of nowhere he said, "Sometimes it is better when people just disappear." I did not ask. Ethan had not seen him since April 18th. Day 4, May 12, 2025, the camera that went blind. A critical piece of Ridgeway Tower's surveillance footage was missing. The security camera facing the rear stairwell had gone dark on April 14th at 9:58 p.m. Maintenance logs showed that someone had accessed the breaker panel using a universal key. Only employees had those, but the key was not missing. Instead, it was found in the backpack recovered from the dumpster, meaning Kyle had either taken it earlier or someone had given it to him. Detective Calder narrowed her focus. She re-interviewed Daniel Horner. "Did you ever lose your master key set?" Daniel shook his head. "No. But 2 months ago, someone broke into the tool shed. Took a few things. I never reported it. Thought it was just kids." Meanwhile, forensic examiners finished analyzing the partially burned shirt found in Miranda's apartment. It had belonged to Kyle. His name was stitched into the tag, a relic from a juvenile detention program he had attended at age 16. Tests revealed blood spatter not just from Miranda but also Kyle himself. It suggested a struggle. A violent one. One where he might have been injured too. The final nail came from Miranda's work laptop recovered from her office. Her browser history included a deleted draft retrieved by forensic software. The message had never been sent, but it read, "To HR, if I disappear, please do not assume I quit. Please tell the police to talk to Kyle Dennett. I am afraid of what he might do." She had written it 3 days before she died, and saved it as a draft, as if she had not yet decided whether to believe her instincts. By the end of May 12th, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Kyle Matthew Dennett on suspicion of homicide, obstruction of justice, and abuse of a corpse. Now all they had to do was find him, because Kyle had vanished. No credit card use, no cell phone activity, no trace. He had slipped beneath the surface like a shadow, and somewhere out there, the man who had hidden a woman's body inside the ceiling of her own apartment was watching every step they took. By the morning of May 13, 2025, the Fort Wayne Police Department was no longer operating in the dark. They were hunting someone they now understood intimately, a man who had known the victim not just in passing, but deeply manipulatively. Kyle Matthew Dennett was not a stranger in Miranda Everly's life. He was a shadow that had followed her for years. Detective Linda Calder spent the early hours combing through Miranda's digital records, emails, social posts, private journals saved on cloud accounts, recovered fragments from her phone. What emerged was a haunting portrait, not of a love story, but of a prolonged unraveling. Miranda and Kyle had met in 2019 at a transitional housing center for adults, aging out of the foster system. She was quiet, careful. He was charismatic, funny, in public, intense in private. The relationship moved quickly. By the end of that year, they were sharing a rented room on the outskirts of town. But the journal entries told a darker truth. "Kyle says I make him do things. That if I just listened, he wouldn't get so angry. But last night, he locked me in the closet again. I told myself it's love. But love shouldn't feel like this." January 4th, 2020. "He took my keys while I was sleeping. He reads my texts when I'm in the shower. He says I don't need anyone but him." July 11th, 2020. The entries stopped for nearly a year, then resumed in early 2023. "I saw him outside my work again. It's been almost 2 years. Why does it feel like I never left March 29, 2023? One of Miranda's co-workers at the dog grooming shop, a woman named Tracy Lynn, told detectives that Miranda never spoke much about her past, but she remembered one thing clearly. "She told me, if anything ever happens to me, start with Kyle." She said it while laughing like it was a joke, but her hands were shaking when she said it. Tracy's voice broke. "I thought she was just being dramatic. I didn't think she meant it." Detectives tracked Kyle's movements further back. In March 2025, his name had surfaced on an incident report at a hardware store just 10 blocks from Ridgeway Towers. A clerk recalled him buying a set of heavy-duty contractor bags, adhesive gloves, and a handsaw. He paid cash. Security footage showed him entering the store wearing the same flannel shirt later found burned and blood-soaked behind Miranda's water heater. But perhaps the most sickening realization came from a discovery made by one of the junior detectives, an overlooked message left on Miranda's voicemail inbox dated April 10, 2025. "Hey, it's me. I know you're not answering, but I want to see you. I just want to talk. I've been watching the apartment I know when you leave. You don't have to be afraid of me. I'm already inside." Those last 4 words, "I'm already inside," sent chills through everyone in the room. The voicemail had been left 4 days before Miranda's final text, and it had been sent while she was still alive. Kyle had somehow gotten back into her apartment, not by force, but by familiarity. A deeper forensic sweep of Unit 312 revealed something else. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken locks, no tampered windows, no pried doors. He had either been let in, or had never left. In a moment of insight, Detective Calder returned to Daniel Horner, the maintenance man. She asked, were there any maintenance requests submitted by Miranda in April? Anything, no matter how small. Daniel searched through the system. Their dated April 5, 2025 was a request from Miranda water heater making weird noises. Please check ceiling tank. Daniel had never responded. The backlog had been long. He never got to her. But it suggested something chilling. Kyle may have been hiding in the attic space even before she died. When police reanalyzed the crawl space, they found 3 cigarette butts and a plastic wrapper wedged behind one of the support beams. Lab tests showed saliva DNA. It was Kyle's. He had not just used the attic to dispose of the body. He had lived up there, waited, watched, perhaps for days. A second name emerged during the investigation, Hannah Pierce, 31. She had once been Kyle's girlfriend in 2017. Police located her in Terre Haute, Indiana. When questioned, she was hesitant to speak at first, but when shown the evidence of Miranda's case, she broke down. "Kyle has something in him," she said. "He gets under your skin, makes you think it's your fault. I left when he broke my ribs." She hesitated, then added, "He used to say something over and over. I'll never forget it." "What did he say?" "If I cannot have you, no one can. And if no one can have you, then no one will ever find you." Detectives now believed that Kyle had planned Miranda's death for weeks, possibly months. He knew her routines. He knew when she worked late. He knew how to manipulate the locks. And once inside, he waited, possibly in the crawl space above, a hidden predator, watching. The attack was likely swift. She never screamed. No neighbors heard a thing. She simply vanished. And for weeks, no one noticed, because Kyle made sure of it. By May 14th, Kyle Dennett was officially listed on the U.S. Marshals' Most Wanted Fugitives in Indiana. His last known sighting was April 18th at a truck stop off I-69. Surveillance showed him boarding a Freightliner headed west, but then he disappeared. To the world, Miranda Everly was a quiet tenant, a dog groomer, a foster kid who kept her head down and paid rent on time. To Kyle Dennett, she was a possession, one he could not bear to let go. And when she finally tried to walk away, he decided if he could not have her alive, no one would have her at all. On May 21st, 2025, just as the trail was beginning to cool, a break came not from forensics, not from a digital ping or surveillance feed, but from a quiet whisper across state lines. In a small privately owned motel outside Peoria, Illinois, the desk clerk noticed a man who refused to show identification. Paid in cash. Hood pulled low. He checked in under the name Ken R. and kept to himself. But what stood out was his behavior. He never left the room during daylight. He paced the floor for hours. One night, the clerk heard sobbing through the vents. The clerk, a retired Army vet named Walter Bryce, had a feeling. He turned on the evening news and saw a face that looked too familiar. Kyle Dennett. He called the tip line at 2:12 a.m. By sunrise, Peoria police had surrounded the motel. They found Kyle barefoot, curled up on the floor beside the bed, rocking. He did not fight. He did not run. He simply looked up at the officers and said, "I knew you'd come." He was transported without incident and handed over to the Fort Wayne Police Department the following evening. Inside the interview room, Kyle sat silent for over 6 hours. He refused food, refused water, refused to look at the photo of Miranda that detectives placed in front of him. Detective Linda Calder entered the room just after 7:30 p.m., alone, carrying a single item, the torn photograph recovered from Miranda's kitchen drawer. The one where Kyle's face was still visible, smiling alive, full of potential. She placed it gently on the table. Kyle stared at it. Minutes passed. Then slowly his jaw clenched. His eyes welled up. And when he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, as if the words had been buried too long inside him. I thought if I buried it deep enough it would go away, but it didn't. Tell me what happened. Kyle looked down, hands trembling. Then he began to speak. He had been living out of his car for nearly 6 months. After a failed construction job in Ohio and a falling out with his cousin, he had returned to Fort Wayne. Alone. Angry. Watching. I saw her at the gas station in March, just walking to her car. She didn't see me, but I saw her, and I followed her home. He paused, rubbed his eyes, continued. I waited 2 days. Then I knocked on her door. She wouldn't let me in. Said I had no place in her life anymore. Said she was better. The way he said better came out like poison. I begged her. Told her I was different now, that I just needed one night to sleep. She didn't believe me. According to Kyle, he broke into the apartment on April 10th using a duplicate key he had secretly made years earlier. He climbed into the attic crawl space when she was out, hid there. Watched through a vent he had pried open with a screwdriver. I could see her brushing her teeth, reading, talking to herself, laughing sometimes. I don't know why, but I felt like I belonged there, like I still had a place. For 4 days he lived in the attic, slept during the day, moved around at night, ate crackers and drank water from a bottle he kept in a backpack. He waited for the right moment. I thought maybe if I just came down and showed her I stayed, she'd see how much I cared, how much I still wanted her. But when he emerged on the night of April 14th, everything went wrong. She screamed, she hit me with the lamp, she said she was calling the cops, that I was sick. His voice cracked, and something in me just snapped. He grabbed her by the neck, dragged her into the kitchen, slammed her head against the counter. She fought, clawed, bit him, left a cut beneath his eye that never fully healed. I didn't mean to kill her, he whispered. I just wanted her to stop. But when he saw her body lying still, the weight of what he had done settled in. He waited an hour before moving her. He pulled her into the bathroom, sat with her, cried. Then he got to work. He dismembered her body over the next 12 hours. Used tools he had brought weeks earlier. He knew the attic tank space was dry, insulated, and almost never inspected. He lined it with trash bags, bleached the bathroom floor, burned the shirt she had torn in the struggle. I thought if I hid her deep enough, if I buried her high above everyone's heads, she would just disappear, like she was never there. He planned to run, but stayed another 2 nights in her apartment. I slept on the couch. I don't know why. I think part of me was still waiting for her to wake up. The detectives listened motionless. Each word added weight to the horror. This was not a spur-of-the-moment act. It was premeditated, prolonged, depraved. And somewhere beneath the layers of guilt and delusion, Kyle still thought what he had done was rooted in love. He ended his confession with one final sentence. She was the only person who ever really saw me, and I made her disappear. Kyle Dennett was charged with first-degree murder abuse of a corpse, unlawful concealment of a death, and obstruction of justice. Bail was denied. The trial date was set for October 2025, but already the city of Fort Wayne had changed. Residents of Ridgeway Towers avoided the 3rd floor. Unit 312 was sealed permanently. Maintenance refused to enter it. The walls were repainted, the flooring redone, but the stench somehow lingered. As for Daniel Horner, the man who made the first call, he resigned quietly 3 weeks later. He left behind his uniform, his badge, and a note that read, "Some things you find do not stay where you found them." By early June 2025, the headlines had begun to fade. The national outlets moved on. The true crime podcasts condensed Miranda Everly's story into 30-minute segments. The public gasped, mourned briefly, then scrolled on. But in Fort Wayne, Indiana, the echoes of what happened in Unit 312 never really stopped, especially for those who had to live with what was left behind. Tracy Lynn, Miranda's co-worker at the grooming salon, now walked past her former friend's empty station every morning. She had not allowed anyone to clear it out. The grooming table still had Miranda's initials scratched faintly into the corner. A red apron still hung on the wall. And on the shelf untouched sat a small mason jar of homemade dog treats Miranda had brought in just a week before she disappeared. She loved the old dogs most, Tracy said once quietly. The ones no one else wanted to handle. She said they deserved patience. Customers still asked about her, and Tracy had to find new words each time not to cry. Miranda's former apartment unit 312 had been emptied, sanitized, and sealed off. The management company quietly changed the unit number to 314A and altered its door color to a neutral gray. But residents still crossed the hall quickly when walking past it. Some claimed the lights flickered near the door. Others said they heard water running inside. No one asked to move in. Daniel Horner, the maintenance worker who found the arm, sold his truck in mid-May and moved to live with his sister in Michigan. He left behind all his tools and refused any job offers related to apartment buildings or renovation. In a recorded statement, he told the department psychologist, "I do not fear what I saw. I fear how long it sat there and no one noticed. We all walked beneath her, for weeks, living like nothing had happened. That changes how you see walls and people." He now volunteers at a shelter for women escaping domestic violence. He never speaks Miranda's name, but he keeps a newspaper clipping about her case folded in his wallet. Back in Fort Wayne, a young woman named Elise Marks, who had been living in Unit 213 below Miranda, installed a full security system in her apartment, even though the building already had cameras. She replaced her locks twice. She started sleeping with the hallway light on. Her new therapist diagnosed her with hypervigilant PTSD. She had been drinking water from the tap for weeks, water tainted by the decomposition above her head. "I brush my teeth and I taste metal," she said. "Even now. Even when it's clean." She has not used tap water since. The coroner's report, released publicly in late May, confirmed what detectives already knew. Miranda Everly had died from blunt force trauma to the skull knot strangulation. Defensive wounds on her arms and missing fingernails indicated a prolonged struggle. A final blow to the left side of the head crushed the temporal bone, causing instant brain death. The report ended with one sentence. Time of death is estimated between 900 p.m. and 1100 p.m. on April 14, 2025, which meant for at least 4 days, Kyle Dennett had lived above her corpse inside the walls of her home before making the first cut. The trial of Kyle Dennett was set for October 14, 2025. But something unexpected happened. He pled guilty. No jury, no testimony, no spectacle. In a soft voice in front of a silent courtroom, he said, "I did it. I deserve whatever you give me." He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. No reaction. He did not look at Miranda's photo placed on the prosecution's table. He just stared at the floor, like he had finally accepted that no hole was deep enough to bury what he had done. But perhaps the cruelest part of the aftermath was this. Miranda had no immediate family to claim her body. No mother, no father, no siblings, no one. The city covered the cost of her burial. A small headstone was placed in Lindenwood Cemetery near a tree that blooms quietly each spring. It reads, "Miranda Faye Everly, 1997 to 2025. She mattered." The quote was chosen by Tracy, her only surviving friend. Every April 14th, Tracy brings flowers. Sometimes others join her, a few neighbors, former co-workers, women who never met Miranda but knew exactly what it meant to be afraid behind closed doors. And while the town has tried to move on, it carries her memory like a bruise under the surface, quiet, invisible, but tender when touched. In one final interview before retirement, Detective Linda Calder was asked what haunted her most about the case. She paused, staring out her office window for a long time before replying. It was not the smell, not the crawl space, not even the confession. It was the idea that she asked for help so many times. And we missed it. She looked down at her badge. Sometimes justice comes too late, and sometimes even when you get it, it does not bring anyone back. And so the story of Miranda Everly ends not with revenge or escape or even resolution, but with absence. A woman whose disappearance went unnoticed. A building that carried a secret just above the ceiling tiles. A city that looked away until it could not anymore. The body was buried, but the nightmare never left.